Carl stood in the middle of the road, legs wide like a cowboy at high noon, one hand outstretched, the other gripping a sidearm pointed directly at my son's chest. "Get on the ground," Carl screamed, voice cracking. "Right now, face down, hands where I can see them." Jason stood calm as ever, arms lifted slowly, palms open, eyes steady on Carl like he was cataloging weaknesses. No panic, no twitch, no sudden moves. Just still, grounded, like a statue with a pulse. "You don't want to do this," he said quietly. "You really don't." Carl took a step forward, gun raised. His hand was shaking. "You're trespassing. You're a threat. You match the description of a suspect seen in the area." Jason tilted his head slightly, like he was genuinely curious how Carl expected that line to hold up in court. "You've seen me every weekend for the last 4 months," he said, "and I've been cleared by the actual police department. You even waved at me last week, remember?" Carl's face flushed a deeper red. Whether from embarrassment or rage, I couldn't tell. I rolled to a stop just behind Jason's truck, leapt out, and started yelling, "Carl, you drop that gun right now." He spun halfway toward me, the muzzle of the pistol trailing between my son's chest and my own rib cage. "Stay back." I moved slowly, hands up, keeping my voice low. "You've lost the plot, man. That's my son. He's unarmed. He's not a threat. You're on private property with a drawn weapon against a resident guest. He's not registered." Carl snapped. "He's not approved. The board said he's a threat. He parked outside the designated area. And then you think that's worth a drawn gun?" I cut in. "You think the county is going to see it that way? You think your badge means anything when it's bought in a novelty store and you're pointing a live weapon at an unarmed man on public roadway?" Carl hesitated. Just long enough. Jason moved. I didn't see it coming. I just blinked. And suddenly, the gun was out of Carl's hand. And Carl himself was on his knees, hands behind his back, his head gently pressed toward the pavement by the full weight of my son's left knee. No bruises, no shouting. Just surgical precision and overwhelming presence. "This is a control hold," Jason said flatly. "I haven't dislocated anything yet." Carl whimpered, trying to twist free. "You attacked me." "He attacked me." Jason just looked at me. "Call the sheriff," he said calmly. I was already dialing. By the time the patrol car pulled up, Jason had stepped away, arms crossed, posture loose, but ready. Carl stayed on the ground, panting and red-faced, trying to play the victim now that his fantasy of being the neighborhood's enforcer had shattered in front of the welcome sign. Deputy Waters got out of the cruiser, hand hovering over his own holster. He looked between us, then down at Carl. "You again?" he muttered. "What is it this time?" "I was assaulted," Carl cried. "I was conducting a legal detention of a suspicious person. This punk went for my weapon." Jason didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Deputy Waters turned to me. "Mind telling me what really happened?" I told him every step, every word. Then I showed him my phone video footage. Jason had started recording the second he pulled up to the gate. Clean, clear evidence of Carl escalating, drawing, and aiming. Waters watched the clip in silence. Then he looked at Carl. "You drew first?" Carl sputtered. He was unregistered. "He's a combatant." He moved like a professional. "That's not illegal, Carl." "You know what is?" Waters asked, folding his arms. "Brandishing a firearm without cause. You're not sworn law enforcement. You're not licensed. You're not even contracted. You're just a homeowner with a power complex and a delusion." I felt the wave of justice roll toward shore. But then, Waters hesitated. His voice dropped. "Thing is," he muttered, "this neighborhood, it's got some pull." And there it was. The moment the scales shifted, the moment justice stuttered, the deputy rubbed the back of his neck. The board's been a generous to the department. Equipment grants, civic partnership stuff. I narrowed my eyes. So what? That buys them immunity. Waters sighed. "No, but it buys them time. If I bring Carl in, there'll be calls from above, and I'd have to explain why I didn't go through proper protocol. Chain of command. Chain of command." I barked. Carl pulled a gun on my son in broad daylight on public access community road. He escalated without cause. "You have it on video." Waters nodded slowly. "And I'll file it." "I will, but don't expect cuffs." "Not today." Jason didn't react. He stood there, arms crossed, watching the entire play unfold like a man who's seen this scene before, only with higher stakes and real casualties. Me? I felt my stomach turn because now I saw it. This wasn't random. This wasn't one HOA nutcase losing his grip. This was deliberate, coordinated, an op. Not a good one, but a setup nonetheless. They weren't just pushing Jason out. They were hoping to bait him into a fight, into an arrest, into something they could spin as justification for the 55U policy, the background checks, the perimeter patrols. This wasn't about violations anymore. It was about leverage, image, control, and they picked the wrong damn family to mess with. Because what they didn't know, what Carl still didn't understand as he sat sobbing on the curb while the deputy filed a half-hearted report, was that Jason didn't just serve, he was still serving. Special Forces, active reserve, cleared for operations I wasn't even allowed to know about. And what they really didn't know was that the incident they just triggered, it wasn't going to be swept under the rug. It wasn't going to end in a whisper. Carl had drawn a weapon on a U.S. service member on American soil with no authority and no cause. That wasn't just a policy violation. That was a federal problem. And now it was my problem to solve. That evening, Jason handed me a jump drive. Footage from the past 6 weeks, he said simply, gate cams, drone footage. I've been monitoring them. I stared. You've been surveilling the HOA? He shrugged. You told me to stay busy. Where'd you get this drone? He smirked. Wouldn't you like to know? I sat down, heart thudding, and opened the first folder. What I saw made my blood run cold and my strategy crystal clear. Hidden meetings, redacted minutes, a vote that was never ratified, a fake contractor approval for Carl's security role. Fraud, plain and simple. And if the sheriff wouldn't act, I knew someone who would. Someone who owed me a favor. Jason leaned against the counter, arms folded. You ready to burn it all down? I looked at him. No, I said. I'm ready to clean house legally, publicly, permanently. Because these people wanted a controlled community. They wanted order, silence, obedience. But they forgot something fundamental. When you play war games in a neighborhood, eventually you meet someone who's actually been to war. The silence after the gate incident was the kind that comes before a storm. Not the loud thunderclap kind, but the slow building one. A barometric drop you feel in your bones. After Carl drew his weapon, after the deputy left without cuffs, after my son handed me a jump drive full of more surveillance footage than most precincts have on file, I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't march to the HOA office and throw a chair through the window. Tempting as that was, no, I did what my grandfather taught me to do when the wolves come too close. I got real quiet. I got methodical, and I got to work. The first place I went wasn't a lawyer's office. It wasn't the sheriff's department. It was a beige little building behind the courthouse with no sign and a busted vending machine. The county records archive. Most folks don't even know it exists. But if you've ever sued a municipality or filed a challenge against a land use change, you know it's the nerve center of everything the HOA doesn't want you to read. I spent 6 hours there flipping through scanned PDFs and yellowed filing folders until my fingers smelled like dust and bureaucracy. And there it was, tucked between an application for a clubhouse expansion and a record of electrical upgrades for the tennis courts. A document labeled Intent to Transition to Age-Restricted Community Resolution 1148 dated, stamped, and signed. Not a single actual homeowner signature on the petition, just typed names. That wasn't legal. That wasn't enforceable. That was fraud. Plain and simple. I took pictures of everything, every missing line, every vote attributed to a homeowner who'd since moved away or died. And then I called Sandra. Sandra's not just a friend. She's the kind of person you call when you need a knife sharpened in a courtroom. A bulldog in heels with a photographic memory and a license to litigate in 3 states. We hadn't talked since the pandemic, but when I sent her the footage of Carl drawing down on my son, she called me back in 7 minutes. This smells like a Rico starter kit, she said, already pulling files on her laptop. And that 55 yen vote, you could wipe the floor with that in front of a county judge. Jason, meanwhile, had turned the guest bedroom into a full-blown command center. Laptop, monitors, DVRs from half a dozen trail cams he'd mounted on trees and light posts, each one tagged and time-stamped. They've got 5 new checkpoints rotating in 2-man shifts, he said one morning, pointing to a screen where 2 retirees in golf shirts were snapping pictures of a car windshield and they're logging plates of anyone under 40 who comes in. No citations, just logging. Another video showed Karen, the HOA board president, meeting a notary in her driveway. Jason paused the footage. That guy, not a real notary, facial match came back. He's a cousin of her husband, works at a used car lot in town. It got worse. We discovered that Carl, the security liaison, wasn't just unlicensed. He was flagged in a public safety database for impersonating law enforcement. Back in 8, he tried to pass himself off as a marshal at a county fair and got banned from 3 municipal facilities. Somehow, that little detail had slipped past the board. Or more likely they just didn't care because Carl did what they wanted. He scared people. He enforced policies they didn't have the legal backbone to stand behind. And for people like Karen, fear was the easiest tool in the box. Jason went deeper, pulled emails from the public HOA contact account because Karen, in all her infinite paranoia, had never properly secured the domain. He found forwarded messages from board members bragging about weeding out the riff-raff and keeping the community clean and orderly. That alone wouldn't hold up in court, but it painted a picture, especially when we matched those emails with a growing list of selective enforcement records. Hispanic family fined $200 for an unregistered vehicle, while the board treasurer's nephew had 3 junkers parked on his lawn. A young couple given a violation for hosting a disruptive social gathering at 7:00 p.m. on a Saturday, while Karen's own birthday bash went until 1 a.m. with a rented DJ and an open bar. The hypocrisy wasn't just gross, it was systemic. Then we dug into the ballots. Every vote on new rules had been pushed through by supermajority approval, according to the board's announcements. But when we matched the votes to the current owner registry, something cracked. Dead people were voting. Rentals were voting. A house that had been empty for 11 months had cast 4 votes. Jason built a spreadsheet. I cross-referenced signatures. We found over 24 instances of proxy votes signed by the same 3 hands. Karen, her vice president Douglas, and a woman named Na, who'd been volunteering to deliver community ballots on her golf cart. They were manufacturing consent, one phantom signature at a time. I started building the case. Not just a civil suit, a presentation, something that could live outside a courtroom. Something meant to be seen by every resident, every neighbor, and if we played it right, every local reporter and planning commissioner within a 100-mile radius. I pulled together footage, documents, and witness statements. Jason worked the angles. We had statements from the 2 teenagers who'd been denied pool access because they looked too young despite being accompanied by their parents. We had a spreadsheet of every fine issued over the past 2 years and a visual heat map showing how they clustered almost exclusively around homes owned by residents under 50. The board wasn't running a community. They were running a quiet purge. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted daylight. I wanted everyone in that neighborhood to see the bones beneath the lawn ornaments. I wanted Karen's perfect little HOA castle to crumble in front of the same people she used to wave at while sipping Chardonnay on her porch swing. So, we planned the strike. Not dramatic, not loud, but precise. We picked the quarterly HOA meeting, the one where Karen would be presenting her vision plan for finishing the 55-yen transition, complete with a proposal to raise dues and limit non-resident guest hours. Jason printed off copies of the full audit. We got them professionally bound. I had 20 copies delivered in advance to key residents. One to a local reporter, one to the city's zoning board, one to the county commissioner's office, and one to a retired judge who just happened to live 5 streets over and had once fined me for burning leaves on a no-burn day. Jason made sure the projector was synced with his cloud drive. He'd rigged the AV system during the neighborhood movie night the month prior, just in case. Not because he's paranoid, because he's thorough. Always be 5 moves ahead, he said, drinking coffee like he was on a stakeout instead of in our kitchen. And when they move, don't move back. Move forward harder. I nodded. My hands were steady, but my mind buzzed because I knew what came next. They tried to block me from speaking. They'd scream about procedure, about order, about how this isn't the right forum. But it wouldn't matter because by the time they figured out what was coming, it would already be too late. Carl had drawn a gun. That was the spark. But now the gasoline was soaked deep into every rule they'd twisted, every vote they'd faked, every resident they'd quietly bullied into silence. They thought they could write us out of our own neighborhood. They forgot the one truth nobody likes to say out loud. You push a quiet man too far, and he stops being quiet. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 6:00 p.m. But by 5:20, there was already a line forming outside the community center. Lawn chairs scraped concrete. Water bottles were passed out like it was a 4th of July potluck. But this wasn't a celebration. This was the reckoning. Word had gotten around. Not from me, not directly. I hadn't said a word on Nextdoor or the Facebook group, but 20 glossy audit packets had a funny way of walking themselves from mailbox to mailbox. You can't stop wildfire with a kindly refer to the Covenant's email. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, every spot was full. Jason was already there, leaning against my old truck in a plain black shirt, arms crossed, looking like the end of someone's story. He didn't say anything, just handed me a folder and nodded toward the community center. They're all inside. Karen's pacing. Carl's posted at the door like a Rottweiler with half a badge. I chuckled low and quiet. He armed. Jason shook his head. Nah, not today. His carry license got suspended this morning. Funny thing, someone filed a weapons complaint with the state licensing board last week, and someone else dropped off the footage of him drawing on me. I nodded. Convenient. Jason gave me the kind of grin that didn't show teeth. Also got a guest of honor waiting in the back lot. Said he wouldn't miss this for the world. Inside, the energy was electric. Neighbors who never even looked up from their mailboxes were now packed shoulder to shoulder. Whispering like gossip was oxygen. At the head of the room, the board sat in their usual thrones. Karen in her white blazer, chin tilted just high enough to seem above the plebeians. Doug the treasurer flipping through a folder full of absolutely nothing. Nob blinking behind oversized glasses, clearly unaware of the grenade about to land in her lap. Carl stood by the main door in an ill-fitting polo that still bore the faded logo of Metro Security Solutions, even though that company had dissolved in 2013. Karen banged her little gavel like she was presiding over Congress. Let's come to order. This is the quarterly Willow Creek HOA meeting. We will not tolerate interruptions, shouting, or unauthorized agenda items. Now, Item 1, the proposed restriction on weekday guest hours. I stepped forward. I have an agenda item. Actually, Karen's jaw locked. Sir, this is not open comment time. You'll need to sit until I drop the thumb drive onto the center podium. Article 5, Section 12.3 of the bylaws. Emergency clause. If a resident presents credible evidence of board misconduct, they are allowed to address the membership immediately. Karen sputtered. That's page 38, I said, staring her dead in the eye. You'd know that if you actually read the documents you forged. A few people gasped. M&A dropped her pen. Jason moved to the back wall, where he'd already synced the thumb drive to the projector. Slide 1, the gate cam footage. Carl, sweating and furious, weapon drawn, barking orders at my son like he was in a bad cop show. No context, no editing, just raw. 108 of truth. You could hear Carl say the words. You match the description of a suspect. You could hear Jason calmly reply, "This is my father's house. I've been here every weekend for months." You could watch Carl reach for the trigger. Karen tried to interrupt. That footage is illegally. Slide 2. Carl's badge. An Amazon screenshot of the same prop badge for $29.99. Next to it, a letter from the county clerk's office confirming Carl had no security license. Never filed. Slide 3. Karen's 55-year-old ballot. 26 signatures, all in the same handwriting overlaid with property records showing 6 of those signers had been deceased for years. Jason stood silently by the wall, flipping each slide like he was turning the pages of a courtroom indictment. Slide 4. A scanned letter from the State Licensing Bureau. Effective immediately. Carl's weapon permit revoked pending investigation into impersonation of law enforcement. Slide 5. The enforcement heat map. Jason's pride and joy. A glowing chart that showed how fine citations and surveillance measures had targeted residents under 50 at a rate 5 times higher than anyone else. You could feel the room shift. And then came the twist. The part nobody expected, not even Karen. From the back door, a man walked in, tall military posture, gray suit, clean cut, clipboard in hand. He walked right up to Karen, extended his badge, a real one this time, and said, "Agent Talbot, Department of Homeland Security. I'm here to formally receive evidence of fraudulent municipal conduct, falsified age discrimination policies, and impersonation of federal law enforcement." Karen went pale. Agent Talbot looked toward Jason and nodded. "Sergeant, thanks for the assist." Jason didn't nod back. He didn't move. He just kept flipping slides. M&A stood up first. "I didn't know," she stammered. "They said the votes were real. They said we were just cleaning up the neighborhood." Doug was next. "I resign," he said quietly, hands shaking. Karen tried to gather her things, but the press had already entered through the side door. Notebooks, recorders, rolling cameras, the local paper, Channel 5. Even that guy from the HOA Watchdog blog, who always wore Hawaiian shirts. Agent Talbot turned to the crowd. You should know this isn't just a community issue anymore. What happened here crosses state lines. That means federal jurisdiction. We'll be following up with every affected resident. Carl, now huddled by the fire exit, tried to slip out. The deputy from the last incident stopped him. Not this time, Carl. The board resigned mid-meeting. One by one, each stepping down like rats off a ship with a hole in the hull and a flaming engine. When it was over, people just clapped. Not loud, not wild, but the kind of slow, stunned applause you hear when the magician pulls off the trick you didn't think was possible. Outside, the sun had started to set behind the trees. Jason walked up to the gate, reached into the truck bed, and pulled out a sign, one he'd made by hand in the garage the day after Carl pulled a gun on him. He mounted it right above the HOA's old plaque, drilling it into the wooden post like it belonged there from the start. White paint on black metal, no serifants, no logos, just bold truth. This community welcomes all ages, especially those who know the law better than you do. By the following week, ballots were mailed out for the formation of a new HOA board. This time with oversight from county officials. This time with actual rules, real transparency. No clipboards, no checkpoints, and not a single pretend security force in sight. Jason and I sat on the porch that evening, coffee in hand, watching a family move in 2 houses down. A young couple, maybe early 30s, 2 kids chasing each other through the yard. The daughter had a toy sword. The boy wore a superhero cape. I like them already, Jason said. Yeah, I replied. Me too. The wind blew soft across the stream. The gate creaked slightly in the distance, and the neighborhood, for the first time in a long time, it felt like home. Advice for the audience. Always protect your rights calmly and knowledgeably. When faced with injustice or intrusion, staying calm and understanding the law helps you respond more effectively than reacting impulsively. Don't let fear or social pressure silence you. If you witness abuse of power or unfairness in your community, speak up boldly, gather evidence, and fight for fairness. Transparency and openness are key. A healthy community is one where everyone is well-informed, decisions are made openly, and there is serious oversight. Stand against abuse of power and wrongdoing. Whether in small organizations like an HOA or elsewhere, no one is above the law. Know how to use legal channels to protect yourself. Stay vigilant and proactive. Monitoring and keeping records of suspicious or unfair activities helps you stay prepared when incidents occur. Prevention is better than cure. Collaborate and connect with like-minded people. One person alone may struggle to make change, but together, your strength multiplies.